no technological difficulties. I was just on a work call, so sorry about that. Welcome back to the second show of this doubleheader here in the Mike the New Haven podcast, episode 386. We're 14 away from the big 400, 400 episodes. That's a milestone. Hopefully we'll hit early next year. I'm thinking sometime in January, so very much excited about that. And again, welcome back for those of you that watched our show this morning. It was a fun one with I speak mistakenly in that regard, current New York City Fire Commissioner Robert S. Tucker, the 35th Fire Commissioner in the history of New York City. And it was a good look at his journey to this current role of his, and of course, what the last 15 months have been like being the New York City Fire Commissioner. So that was a lot of fun. I thank all of you who tuned in this morning, and you're back again for this nightcap with an equally interesting guest who I'll introduce momentarily after, of course, we run a couple of ads. So we'll switch it up a bit from the order that we did it in this morning. First things first, you'll hear from, once again, Billy Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD Detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast. And also a word, of course, from our friends over at Granite State. Hey there, firefighters and fire buffs. If you're tuning in to the Mike the New Haven podcast, you know the value of reliable gear. At Granite State Fire Helmets, we're proud to introduce the TL2, our premium leather Phoenix fire helmet. The TL2 is all about comfort, durability, and that timeless style you trust. And here's the best part. All in-stock inventory usually ships within 24 hours, so you'll have it in your hands in no time. Plus, our company is proudly owned and operated by firemen, so you know we've got your back and understand exactly what you need out there on the front lines. So don't wait. Gear up with the TL2 today. Granite State Fire Helmets, where tradition meets innovation, and where firemen have you covered. Have you covered indeed. Don't forget about their giveaway going on through December 24th for those of you, of course, with a firefighter in your life, or maybe you were a fireman yourself. My next guest is a former officer in the United States Marine Corps, and if you could do that, you can do anything else. Like I said before, any police academy after that type of training is a cakewalk by comparison. He's a decorated law enforcement officer whose career has spanned both coasts and multiple agencies. And think about the agencies you see the most portrayed in movies and television, right? It's either the NYPD or the LAPD. He worked for both. How cool is that, as he'll tell me about tonight. He started out in South Central Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Police Department and decided to come to the East Coast and work for the New York City Police Department, carving out a great career. And in addition to that, serving as a police officer and community liaison at a major university, of which he'll tell me about tonight. He wrote a book, too, What Hasn't the Guy Done? I'm talking about retired NYPD Lieutenant, former Los Angeles police officer, and author Dave Goldstein. Lieutenant, welcome. How are you?
Hey, good, Mike. How are you?
Good to have you. Looking forward to this conversation. So tell me first, again, not an odd journey, because odd would mean bad, but a unique journey for sure, and that's meant in the best of ways. Yeah. So tell me about where it all began. Where did you grow up originally?
I grew up in New York, mostly on Long Island. I lived in Queens till I was 8. Then we moved to Long Island, and I finished up there. Then I went to school at Florida State, and then while I was in college, I enlisted in the Marines and the reserves. And so I went to the boot camp, and then I got out. I was in a tank battalion in the reserve unit. I didn't drive the tanks. I was motor transport. But then when I graduated college, I got accepted to officer candidate school, and I went active duty as an officer. And I got out before, all the wars and everything. But I was in air defense, and so I was in Okinawa, and then Cherry Point, North Carolina, at their base. And so when I was getting out of the Marines, I always knew I wanted to go into law enforcement. Back then, I was thinking FBI, which now I'm very glad I didn't. Like, the FBI is great. It's just, yeah, I'm more of I like the street cop stuff. I like so I called them. They were very nice, but when I was getting out, I think I was about 26 at the time, and they wanted someone with a little more experience after college. Like I had the 4 years of the Marines or whatever. They wanted a little more, and so I wound up actually calling NYPD. But back then, it's like late 90s. They were only giving the test like once a year back then. Now they're giving it like 8 times a week, But it's back then it was still like it was hard, a little harder to get on. So I remember I called them. We were going to be doing like a deployment to Greece, just like a training exercise to Greece for a couple weeks. So I said, I'm going to miss the test. I called the guy, hey, do you think you could hook me up, or could I come back and take it after? He was just like such a whatever. He's like, come back next year, and hung up on me. But which never would happen now. Now they'd be like, oh yeah, but
when can you come in?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 4 felonies on your record? No, we can work with that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But but the LAPD was going around the country. They were having a problem recruiting back then. It was like in the wake of the Rampart scandal. So they were coming around all the bases. And so I went to the infantry base at Camp Lejeune. I took the test there. I did the out-of-state testing process for a week. And I was in the LAPD Academy before I was still getting paid by the Marine Corps, on my terminal leave. And so, so I did like LAPD a lot. It's a great department, but like I kind of came to a point where I couldn't imagine staying out in LA for 20 or 30 years. I'm from New York, so I moved back to New York, had to go through the NYPD Academy. I mean, I started right away as soon as I left LAPD, and then so I had to go through that academy, which, whatever. And then, then I did my career, and I've never regretted it.
No,
at all. Yeah.
Not at all. And just to go back before I really hit on the LA years, and they were brief, 2001 to 2003, but nevertheless, you were a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and you were on active duty in 1997 and 2001. Really, the only conflict from that time was Kosovo, which was very brief in nature.
Yeah.
It was kind of over as soon as it began when Clinton went against Milosevic at that time. But nevertheless, I mean, tell me about, again, a lot of the values. You carry that into the police service as well, paramilitary organization in its own right, mirroring a lot of what the military does in nature. So I imagine going into a structure like first the LA Police Academy, how similar was it? And that must have been, like I said in the introduction, compared to what you were doing in boot camp at Cakewalk.
Well, it's funny because you think it's gonna be a joke because you've been through the enlisted boot camp, the officer boot camp, now, like, look, all Marine officers go through like a basic infantry training and all that, but you don't go through the specialized infantry training. So I'm not the guy, look, if you're fighting in a war, I'm not the guy who's gonna know how to do all that, but but
you're
if you're policing,
it.
I know a lot of, I've done a lot of policing in my career, but the main values I took from the Marine Corps is, a lead from the front, and that's the most important, and taking accountability for your actions. So, and those of your subordinates. So the way I always did my career, and I do attribute this to that military mindset, is that, even through my whole career, and even as a lieutenant, I was a lieutenant my last 6+ years on the NYPD. I was always the first one through every door. I was always the first one, Now, look, if it's a heavy door and I get a 22-year-old who could kick it in before me, 45, and have it, now I'm 51, but, like hip and all these problems, yeah, I'll have him kick it in. But, but I always said, you got to be first. You should be first at the door, because if you're cops and, subordinates, it's like that in every job. But if they see that you know what you're doing, the only way you're going to know what you're doing, you don't learn what to do by climbing up in rank. You learn how to do the job by doing the job as a cop, and then doing the job as a sergeant, and then doing it as a lieutenant. And you learn to lead not by taking courses or by sitting in an office or saying I'm a SWAT commander or this, that. You learn by doing the job.
Right.
And there's no experience. I tell people that, you could have a doctorate in policing. It means nothing. The only thing that really matters is experience. And so the way you learn is by doing. And so you can't, and the way you have people actually do what you say and rather than do what you say because they're scared of you, have them do what you say because they know you know what you're talking about, and they want you to come to their calls because, like, well, he always knows what to do, and he's going to accept responsibility for whatever happens. And he's not. I've seen too many times. See, either we call them the house mice in NYPD. I talk about that in my book. Guys who spend their whole careers inside, or even guys who, let's say, they're house mice, but they become a sergeant and they go out to patrol, and they think all of a sudden I'm a sergeant or I'm a lieutenant. I don't have to do basic police work anymore. Well, I got to tell you, if you're a block away from the call, and it comes out, I've seen sergeants, like new sergeants, wait. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't you go to the call? Oh, I'm waiting for the first cops to get there, and then I'll go. No,
you're still a cop.
Someone could be getting hurt in there. You go to the call. You'll observe the cops plenty. You'll have plenty of time to observe how the cops handle calls. That's all you should be doing. You should know every single cop in your shift, and you should know how they handle calls because you see the way they do it. Sometimes you're going to take charge, and you can be like, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. Sometimes you'll let them, you'll hang back a little bit, let them. But if it's you can't. You have to accept the fact that you're always going to be at the heart. You're still a police officer. You're in charge, but you're still a police officer. Mm-hmm. You have, if you're the closest guy to the suspect, you're the one who's going to grab him and put him in cuffs. If you're the closest guy, if he's over, if he's across the room, I learned when I first became a sergeant, it was funny. We had these guys stopped outside the projects, and they were troublemakers, to put it mildly. And so I'm talking to the guy, I handcuff one guy, and I'm holding on to him. I'm talking to the other guy from like 5 feet away, but a cop is with him, and he's lying to me, about his name and date of birth, and I could tell that was before we had MDTs in all the cars. It was a pain in the butt to run somebody, so you couldn't always. And then even if we run them by communications, it's like you really need to be looking at a screen to say, hey, is this the guy or not? Or have somebody who knows what they're doing looking at. So, but I figured out he was lying. So I was like, all right, you know what? Cuff him up. Big mistake. I did have the guy. I couldn't go over there because I was holding on to the one guy who was cuffed up. So, of course, as soon as he hears cuff him up, he starts taking off, and I'm grabbing him. But like the whole point is, if you're a supervisor, if you're the closest one to the suspect, you should be the one to handcuff him. Okay, you're not going to get stuck with all the paperwork for the rest. That's going to be the police officer. You're going to help him. You could help him out with it, but you're not going to process the rest. But you're the one who's going to put the cuffs on because you're closest to him. You learn. Like when you're working with a partner, you learn to do little signals like like this when the guy's not looking. I don't know if like this or whatever. Or you say but you don't want to get too fancy, but. The best way I found is because a lot of times when someone knows they're going to be cuffed up, that's when they have the chance to be like, okay, I'm going to run, I'm going to take off. A lot of times the best way to avoid fights, and you're going to get in a lot of tussles as police officers. There's no way around it.
It's inevitable. Not everybody's going to want to be cooperative.
Get in a lot, but you want to get in as few as you can. Mm-hmm. And because things always happen. Someone twists their knee, somebody, now you lose a cop.
Tears an ACL.
You twist your knee. Yeah, I've had ACL. I had total ACL tear chasing a guy with a gun. We caught him, but I was out for like 6 months. Everything, things happen. I've smashed my face on the concrete. I've been bitten. I've been headbutted, and so it's like, you want to get in as few. So a lot of times the best way to do it is if you're working with someone who knows you kind of know as a sergeant, lieutenant, you're going to train people, and they're going to see the way you want to do things. A lot of times the best way, if you both know he's going, you both grab a hand real quick, and he doesn't have the time to think, oh, I'm going to punch this guy in the face, and then I'm going to turn and run. It's just like you both grab a hand real quick, and then, you yoke his hand, and then you cuff him up, and you avoid any kind of, problems. Now, sometimes you both grab a hand, and he twists out, and you're going to fight him anyway. Mm-hmm. But that eliminates a lot of your fights and a lot of your foot pursuits, just being smart about it. You never want to telegraph, as I was a university cop in Boston for 4 years. Not a great experience, but the way they were training was that, when you handcuff someone, you have your handcuffs in your hand, and I think it's the way the state trains, and say, turn around, sir, place your hands behind your back. You never want to do that. Now, you do that if you think the guy has a gun, you're going to prone him out or whatever on the ground, but you never do it like that, because now he has all this time to think, oh, shoot, the cops are arresting me. And now he has the time to think, I'm going to run, I'm going to turn and fight. You want to
I'm going to throw a punch.
You want it to be over quickly. Now, sometimes you say, turn around, put your hands behind your back. No. And you can't grab him or whatever. No. What, were you going to arrest me? Yes, you're going to be arrested. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. And, like a lot of times that'll work. A lot of times, sometimes it won't. I mean, you're going to want to, but you always want to be kind of one step ahead of the guy. You never want to stick your face in his face. You don't want to be a tough guy, like, having your hands. You always want to be bladed from the guy. I see young rookie cops especially they let cops have their hands outside. They let the vests on the outside.
They're like, I know someone like this.
Yeah. I think it's awesome. But they'll be talking to someone and they got both hands shoved in their vest. I'm like, you got a year on the job, but I don't care if you have 20 years on the job. Have you ever been punched in the face? Because I have plenty. I don't like it. And like, that's what... that's what's going to happen if you get the wrong guy. He's going to punch you in the face if you're like that. You let him know that you're at least ready for something to happen, and he sees that by your demeanor. I don't care how your uniform looks. I don't care if your boots are shine. That's all nonsense. It's just how you carry yourself. Is like if you look like you're always expecting something, then they're going to be less likely. They still might, but they're less likely.
Of course. And the thing that you have to keep in mind with this, too, and we're talking with retired LAPD officer and NYPD Lieutenant David Goldstein, too, is that I'll never forget what Joe Dolan told me on the show. He was a ESU guy and a bomb squad guy on the NYPD for 21 years. He said, anytime you encounter somebody, always treat them with respect. And for as crazy as it sounds, he also added, but always have a plan to kill them. And what he meant by that is you don't know how the interaction is going to go. You don't come in on a 10, you come in on a 1. Yeah. But gradually it can escalate because these guys, especially the guys that are frequent flyers, they've been to jail before. They don't want to go back. To your point, they're already thinking the second I have a chance, I'm going to throw a punch. I'm going to throw a kick. I'll shove them and take off. Or worst case scenario, I'm reaching for that knife. I'm reaching for that gun. And then it's on. You have to be ready. I mean, again, Phil Caruso, the old PBA president, said it best. Policing is a contact sport. You have to be ready to go at any given time. It's not for the faint of heart. That's why I can never do the job because I don't want to fight anybody, But then again, not that you're waking up every day like your prime Mike Tyson or prime Ken Shamrock. Let's get it on. But sometimes you're going to have to.
No, yeah,
there's no choice.
No, that's so true. Like what you just said, like the contact sport, it's so true. It is true. Another way I've heard it described, when this guy I knew, I used to work with Sean Brown, he was a sergeant. One time he was addressing roll call. We were in Bed-Stuy at the time, and something had happened, I forget. But I remember he comes in and he goes, listen to the cops, listen, this is not a gentleman's job. He's like, someone can have, this is not a job where you're coming in a suit and tie and you're looking pretty. And, he's like, look, it's not a gentleman's job. At the end of the day, it's a dirty job. And it really stuck with me, like what he meant by that, because at the end of the day, you're going to get spat on. You're going to have to sometimes clean up people's garbage. Like it's disgusting. It's the greatest blue collar job there is. But at the end of the day, it is somewhat of a blue collar. Like you're dealing with a lot of shit. You're going to get spat at. You're going to trip. You're going to be climbing stuff. You're going to get dirty. It's just, it's a job that like, there was this thing they used to teach us, and I'm sure they still do that. The FBI did a study, and they said that if somebody has spit shine boots and they have a hat on, and the perps are going to be scared of that person, and they're going to think that he's the guy, but the guy who looks all sloppy, they're not going to be. I don't agree with that. I think as long as you look alert, because I've met guys who have the gnarled ears, cops who have the gnarled ears and are big, tough guys, right? Mm-hmm. That's who they're scared of. That's who they're scared of. They're scared of someone who's like, looks like they're ready to fight, but they'll still fight them too. They'll fight anybody. But, the way you talk to people is too. You talk to people with respect and dignity, but that doesn't mean that you don't ever raise your voice or you don't ever say, this is the way it's going to be. The one thing you don't want to do is lose control.
I was going to say that. Yep.
Yeah. Now, there are times when you will curse at someone. Like if you're holding a gun on someone and they're running from a shots fired and you think they just shot someone, or you're running, you might say, get the F down on the ground. Because if I say, sir, I need you to calmly go on the ground, he's going to think you're a punk. And he's going to be like, I don't care if you're old like me. He's still going to think you're a punk. And he's going to, you might have to say, get the F on the, but in general, someone doesn't want to turn around. Turn around. I said, turn around, put your hands behind your back. But you don't start cursing at them at that point. You know what I mean? Like you don't, the way you talk to someone, you can talk to someone in a loud voice. And what I've found, and this is partially from having kids, my kids are all older now, but like,
right.
There have been people who've been like streakers who've been screaming at me, just like, what the hell? And look, I don't have enough yet. I don't know what I'm going into. I don't know if I'm going to arrest him. I don't know if, he's a witness, he's a victim, he's a suspect. I don't even know, but I know he's a potential threat. He's screaming at me, he's yelling. And sometimes it doesn't always work, but there've been times when I've been like, sir, you're screaming at me. I'm talking to you with respect. Okay. I'm talking to you like a man. All right. Just please tone it down a little bit. You don't have to scream and curse at me. And that will work sometimes. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes I'll just call you a piece of shit and it won't work. But you have to read the room a little bit. But like the thing is, anyone who says that one thing applies to all situations, or that one way of doing things is always the right way, no. Generally speaking, no, but there are certain best practices that you always got to follow as a police officer, such as you got someone in handcuffs. This person is your responsibility. If you lose them, it's a lot of problems. Okay.
And a lot of paperwork.
I don't care if it's a 16-year-old girl you arrested for shoplifting. All right. They're more likely to escape, in my experience and from what I've seen, than a 40-year-old guy you arrested for murder. I'm not saying that the 40-year-old guy is not going to try to escape, but whenever you read about escapes and you see people try to run, it's usually younger people. And a lot of times, sometimes they're arrested for something serious. A lot of times they aren't. Somebody just might have a date that night. They might just whatever. Or the guy could be wanted for murder in Florida and you don't know about it. But you have to, with prisoners, you have to do it the exact same every time. And that's how you won't have any problems and you won't lose them. But for dealing with stuff out on the street, you're gonna have to like look at the situation and you're gonna have to adapt that way. And you can't always say, "Oh, I'm always gonna do this" or "I'm always gonna do that."
Yeah, of course. And you understand this because even in those 2 years that you were in LA from 01 to 03, I mean, you were in the West Valley, you were also in South Central. Different context, different place, same approach. That's the thing. And you have the benefit of being able to say that because you were a police officer on 2 different coasts for 2 different departments. It's the same concept overall. The backdrop may be different. The patrol car colors may be different. You went from black and white to blue and white, but nevertheless, the concept of how you deal with people is the same. It never changes across the board.
No, it's the same. It's the same everywhere. And the best cops are the ones who know how to talk to people. And also they're not, look, I would say to be a cop, you can't be a coward. You can't be a racist and you can't be a bully. Mm-hmm. As long as you're not a coward or racist or bully, you don't have to be the bravest person that ever lived. You don't have to be the strongest, toughest person, but you can't be a coward. When you hear gunshots, you got to run towards them as a police officer. That's the one hard and fast rule. When someone's being hurt, I don't care if you like, this is going to go bad for me. You got to get in on it. Whatever you do in your civilian life, that's whatever. But when you strap on that uniform, you have to understand that your safety is less important than other people's safety. It just is part of the job. They used to say when I first became a cop, oh, the important thing is that we go home at the end of the night. Yes, that is important. But
yes, it is.
If you hear gunshots, you have to run towards them. You can't just be like, oh my God, I don't know what's around that corner. That's why you get a retirement. That's why whatever people say, my whole career, I was always proud to tell people I was a police officer. And there's a lot of people don't like the cops, but even people say, oh, this area, everyone hates us. No, a lot of people like you and a lot of people respect you. And
they want you there.
And they want you there. And, in any area, I've worked in a lot of high crime areas in my career, busy high crime areas. But in all those areas, most of the people who live there are good, law-abiding citizens.
It's that 10%.
You can have, if you're in a precinct of 120,000 people, that's bigger than a lot of towns or cities, right? So you could have 2,000 or 3,000 people who are career violent perpetrators, right? Too many even for you to know everyone, 3,000 people. That's like 2% of the whole, that means 98% of the people are law-abiding. You're going to be dealing with those 3,000 and a couple of other 1,000 troublemakers. You're going to be dealing with them all the time. So you might have an opinion of that area that doesn't really match what it actually is because you're only seeing the worst. And you're only seeing the worst and you're only dealing with most people don't call the cops that much, honestly. Most people, even if you live in a busy area, you might call the cops a couple of times. But, a lot of the people who are repeat callers, a lot of them are in the life themselves, or whatever. So you're only seeing the worst. And that's what I would tell people. Like, you gotta keep in mind, this is not a war zone. Yeah, we do dangerous things. We've all been hurt. We've had bad things, but you're not in Iraq or Afghanistan. Even if you're working in South Central Los Angeles, you're working in South Chicago, you're working in Philadelphia.
The 7-5.
Yeah, the 7-5 precinct. Then you're not in a war zone. Like, it's dangerous. Yeah, I've been, I've worked when I was in transit. I covered the 7-5. I worked the 7-5 when I was, patrolling the 7-5 coverage, this and that. And I've been in the pink houses and all them. And I was in the 8-1 for a long time. And I've worked in the 7-3 when I was in transit, like a lot of times by myself, with no backup. And yeah, they're statistically, they're dangerous areas. They are. But there are also children who walk in the middle of the day and nothing happens to them. Or, like children, you're in a housing project. Oh my God, this is the worst project. The pink house, this or that is the worst project. Yeah, but there's old ladies, there's old men, there's children who walk, and most likely nothing's going to happen to them on any given day. It's not, some people paint a picture that you're in a war zone and you're not. You're a police officer. You could be in a dangerous area, a busy area. But if you start thinking you're in a war zone, then you need to really take a step back and really look at the statistics. We have 15, 20 homicides in a 100,000 person area. Yeah, the crime rate's kind of high, but
it ain't Mogadishu in 1993.
Yes, it's not. It's not the killing fields. It's not. You talk to guys who are in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's just a lot different. I mean, I've actually dealt with grenades as a cop a couple of times when someone had it. It turns out none of them have been live, but I've had it, a couple of times. But I've never in my life had a grenade thrown at me that exploded near me. I've never had, I've never stepped on I've never had to IEDs. The thing is that, like, it's a danger. Being a police officer is a dangerous job, but the main danger is, yes, you could be killed, but you're going to get hurt. You're going to get punched. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to deal with that. You're going to deal with, a lot of like bad situations, but like, you do have to put it in perspective to some degree. There are times when you'll tussle with people 2-3 times in a day, but it's all, cause it's not just people you're arresting. It's emotionally disturbed persons. A lot of times you got to, to get them in front. It could just be a drunk person, someone's high, that you have to, for their safety, you have to like get them, and you tussle with people, but it is on a different level. You're not in a war zone. And anytime a cop thinks he's in a war zone, I think that they need to take a step back.
No, of course, because then it's going to kind of, you look at everybody as the enemy. And as you said, most people there are your friends. It's not really the case. And to your point, listen, I'm not saying it's a good thing when it happens. I'd rather not see them get assaulted. I'd rather, of course, as you said, you don't want to get assaulted. The cops that you had under you, you don't want to see them get assaulted either. But if you go through a 20, 25, 30, 35, sometimes even more than that career in the New York City Police Department, or any busy police department for that matter, and you didn't get scuffed up a few times, you didn't do anything. You didn't have you weren't getting your hands dirty. You weren't a real cop. You were a cop in name only.
Yeah. And there's a lot. Like I always tell people, the NYPD, I don't know, it's maybe 32, 34,000 now. A lot of my career was like 36,000. But, and I'm saying, look, NYPD has like 9,000 of the best cops in the world. Those 9,000 people are what's keeping the city safe, 9,000. And you have another like 5,000 of really good cops who are like, out there. And whether they're naturally really good or not, and if you're in a busy place in New York City, you're dealing with so much stuff that you're going to learn to talk to crazy people. You're going to learn to talk to people, and you're going to learn to do the job well, better than, somebody who's a genius who works in a low crime area who never really experiences it. You're just going to learn to do it. But NYPD does have probably about 18,000 people, at that time. Maybe it's 16,000 now, who work administrative jobs. And, anytime someone tells you something that seems too crazy, or that they have a job that they can't really, that doesn't make sense. Like, I'm a detective in narcotics. That makes sense to me. I'm a detective in vice. I'm a detective in a detective. That don't make sense to me. I'm a patrol officer. I'm a patrol sergeant. If you say I'm a crime analysis, I work for the chief's office, this or that, that means you're not doing police work.
Right.
You're
And
not
that,
doing police.
and it better be, to make an addendum, you better be there at the end of what's been an active 20, 25, 30-year career, where that's your assignment to kind of wind down because you've paid your dues.
But
If you're
that's
there,
rarely the case. That's
exactly.
rarely.
If you're there with 3-4 years in the job, I'm like, and again, what does it boil down to? Who do you know? Who's your rabbi? Who's your hook?
Right.
That's
But
all.
you shouldn't even want that. Like I had like I never had when I went on, I didn't know anyone on the job in New York, but like there was an executive officer I worked with when I first got out there, and I'd been on LAPD before, so it's like I had a decent amount of experience, not still 2 years,
couple years
patrol
in
experience, but
one of the business cities
but
in New York.
so when I first got there, my last 4 years, and I was 5 years in transit. My first year I worked, mostly covered like Bed-Stuy and downtown Brooklyn area. Then after that, I went to, we were covering like Brownsville, East New York area, going out to even Williamsburg and stuff. But in this area, when I first got there, they'd have us at the Bed-Stuy post every day, Nostrand Avenue and Classen Avenue and Franklin Avenue. And so like back then, like it was like people would just like they had us there overnight, like 7 to 4 in the morning or whatever. And so you would arrest them for a minor thing, like jump at a turnstile or just minor thing, and it would be a fight. It would be a fight, and you'd be surrounded by a bunch of people, and you had to call, "Hey, we need someone to pick us up. Well, when are you coming?" You kind of deal. Like I don't really like, but so he saw the way I handled myself, and I did more than everybody else. And so so after that, he kind of like looked out for me my whole career, because he eventually went to, he had a lot of time on the streets, but he eventually went to employee management. He did the right thing. He did 20 plus years on patrol, and then he ended his career in employee management, that's honorable. He had the time on,
that's like I said, that's the assignment to end to wind down after paying your dues.
And he looked after me, and I hooked into Bed-Stuy. When I was getting out of trans, I wanted to stay in Brooklyn North. He got me into the 8-1. He used to make fun of me. He was like, "You hooked into the 8-1, because it's a busy,
Right."
And then when I was becoming lieutenant, I wanted to stay in Brooklyn, but they wouldn't let me stay in Brooklyn, so I wound up going to the 113 South Jamaica, Queens, busy area. But he also helped me with that. So but I wasn't gonna hook into an administrative type job. That's not why I became a cop. I mean, if you want to be administrative for a police department, that's fine, but don't become a cop. There are plenty of people who want to be cops who couldn't for whatever reason. And I always told people, this job is like winning the lottery. But what you should not do is to work. If you're working an inside job, how do you justify that? Because I never had an issue with the inside people, because I'm not a tough guy. Like, listen, I'm not a coward, but I'm not a tough guy. But as a cop, I always said, I'm going to do the right thing. And look, if it doesn't work out well for me, oh well, that's my job, But the thing is that I was always wanted to be in busy areas. I was always active, and I wanted to be, where things were happening. But if you're a guy who's like, I'm a tough guy, but I got this hook, I could work inside. It's like, well, you're not going to learn the job. You're not going to be good at the job. You're going to be an a-hole to people, because you're going to think you know everything. And also, like, how do you justify taking that money from the city when you're not and a 20-year retirement or 25-year retirement when you're not doing anything? You're not doing any police work. You should just become a civilian. That was always and when I became a supervisor, I really saw it, and I deal with this in the book a lot. I remember when I was on either I worked when I was in Best, I worked the midnights, I worked the 4 to 12s, and then I worked the day shift, and as a sergeant. And I remember when I was on the day shift, I could have 8 cops to cover the whole precinct. One of the most violent precincts in the city, and I could have, by the end of where everything, prisoner transports, people sitting in a hospitalized prisoner, traffic accidents, this and that, crime scenes, I could be down to like 3 people or 4 people. And I'd always say, okay, well, you are a crime analysis. You are the plant man. You work in roll call. You do this, you do that. I need you to suit up. I'm driving myself, answering calls. I got 1 unit basically covering the whole precinct. And I say, all right, I need you to go answer calls. Oh, I can't. I have things to do for the commanding officer. I don't care. Go out, suit up. People are calling 911. I'm holding 8 calls. 2 of them are domestics. People expect someone to come when they call 911. You got to go. All right. Sure enough, I'll get a call 2 minutes later. How dare you try to get my person? You're not managing your resources properly. And they won't. But meanwhile, these same people, if I told them, listen, I know they would see what happens sometimes. One police plaza would call and they say, we have a brunch going on. We need a cop to come in their dress uniform here. I can't send my cops. I don't have enough people to do that. It would be nice to send them. I'm sure they like it. I can't send them.
It's just not possible.
I would go up to the inside people. Hey, I need you to suit up right now and go to one police plaza because they're having a brunch there. They would always have time to do that. They would never call their commanding officer and say, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm too busy." They would always have time to do that. They just didn't want to work the streets. And when they were made to work the streets, they were bad. They were bullies. They were scared to do their job. They were scared of their own shadow, and they were nasty to people, and they didn't do their job properly. And that's when it really hit me. Like, you're gonna be a cop, just be a cop.
Yeah,
like. That's
and it's either in you or it's not. It's either in you or it's not.
Right.
And
if it's not in you, there's no shame in that.
It's not for everybody.
No, and there's no shame in that. Like, I know people who's like, I remember talking to my brother, and my brother was like, how do you do it? He's like, if I went up to someone in a street corner, I told him, you need to leave. And they're like, no, F you. He's like, I might just be like, and I said, no, but that's fine. You didn't become a cop though.
Right.
Like, just fine. There's nothing wrong with
you know yourself, you know your limits.
Yeah, so I guess to be a cop, you kind of have to, you can't be that afraid of confrontation, because you're going to get in a lot of stuff that's great. And also great confrontations where it's like, I know I can't do anything to this guy, but I need him to leave. And, so you got to kind of bluff or think about what you can do. But it's like, there's a lot of gray stuff that's really like, sometimes you're scared. I don't mean physically, but you're scared. Like, I don't know what to do here because I need to handle the situation, but he's not letting me, and it's like, sometimes you have to, that's where your experience and, comes into play,
Absolutely. And mind you, you had transit for 5 years. And John Latanzio, who's a housing cop and also an emergency service cop in the NYPD, verbal judo. That's what Commissioner Bratton coined it as, and Commissioner Safer as well. But that being said, you had transit for 5 years. So it's not even just a specific beat. Obviously, you had the 8-1. I'll get to that as a boss. And you also were in Queens as a lieutenant, too, before you winded down your career. But in a situation like that, you're not dealing with the same people for the most part every day. So the approach changes in that particular sense, but all the more reason to keep that control because you're in, quite literally, a moving environment. Trains going, people going with it, a lot of people to keep an eye on, all the more reason to have your bearings because that should, obviously it helped you those 5 years before you became a boss on the NYPD side, and it carried with you into the 8-1 and later on, of course, out in Queens.
Yeah. That's definitely true. And when you're in transit, you work by yourself a lot. So, you could be on a subway platform at 2 a.m. and there's no one coming to help you. So you got to be able to, your tactics change a little bit. You learn what works for you. There's times when you have to stop 2 or 3 people. You say, hey, you guys come over here. You have to be smart. Like part of the, I remember when I was in the 7-5 precinct. I was at one of the train stations, and I think I was in a storeroom because I think I was smoking a cigarette. I'm not supposed to, right? Whatever. So yeah. So I see these two, maybe 16, 17. They double up at a turnstile. So I'm like, I'm gonna go grab them. But then the one guy starts running as soon as he sees me. He starts running down to the platform. I think it was Shepherd Avenue. He starts running down to the platform. So you have the local train at that point, the C train, but you don't have the A train, the express train. So anyway, so the first I see him holding his waistband, so I know he's got a gun. So, but the other guy, I don't know if he has a gun too, whatever. So I have to grab him too. So I grab him. I don't have any backup or anything. I handcuff him to the banister. And I cinched the cuffs really tight, so that he couldn't get out of it. And I searched him real quick. He didn't have anything. I think he had a knife on him or something. I took that off him. I said, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, yeah, he has a gun, blah, 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 blah. So then I ran down to the platform and I didn't see him. And a train had come, but I think it was the express train. And I saw some lady. I said, you see somebody just up? She said, no, she didn't see nothing. Then I finally find him hiding behind like a storage box at the end of the platform. Prone him out, got him, got the gun, whatever. But it's like, no one ever told me that I was going to have to, that I could handcuff someone to a banister. if something had gone wrong with that, I would have been in a lot of trouble. But I made a judgment call, and I said, you know what? I know I'm going to cinch the cuffs tight. He's not going to be able to get out. Now, if he was Houdini or he had a handcuff key somewhere on his person, or if I just didn't, I cinched the handcuffs
properly
skin
or
tight.
whatever.
I cinched the handcuffs skin tight on him, but that could have gone bad for me. And there was one other time when I did that, when I had a guy in cuffs for a warrant or something, and a lady upstairs, she just got robbed, and I wound up catching the guy, but I got lucky on that other one. I threatened him with how would I word it, and he stayed, and then I wound up letting him go. But as a thank you, but that's that's not. But your tactics change, So I was happy, sometimes you have to be in terms of when you're working by yourself in a rough area, you do have to be a little bit more, in some ways, a little more wordy, and in some ways, a little more like physical. In some ways too, like it's just because it's they know I just got to get past this one guy and I'm out of here. It's a lot different. It's better. I've worked by myself with no backup, but you know what? I'd rather have 10 cops there than 2 cops any day. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's too many, but yeah, I'd rather have, if I can have 4 or 5, 6 cops there, I'll have that. Yeah. That was the thing I had working as a college cop. You would have sometimes a situation that it required people to come. But, Goldstein said he was NYPD. He knows how to handle it. And they won't even back you. And I'm like, this was a potentially dangerous call. Like, the guy's walking around with a stick with a metal pulley swinging at people. And nobody came to back me. Well, yeah, but we know you could handle it. No, I'd rather have more people. I handled it, whatever. But I'd rather have everybody come to that call, rather than nobody come. I'm sorry, but that's the thing. It's like you do what you get. I was talking with a guy Iceman, he does the Motor Cop Chronicles, and he's talking about how he's in the boonies, and so he could have no backup for 30, 40 minutes. You deal with what you got. You work with what you got. But if I have the personnel, I'd rather have more personnel there in a lot of cases than have less. It's always better to have more.
Of course. And again, that's where that verbal judo comes into play for the cops working out in rural territories. And again, it's not encouraging complacency. Just because backup's close by doesn't mean you want to use it if you don't have to. But it helps to know, all right, if I call within 30 seconds, I'm going to hear the sirens wailing. In transit case, I'm going to hear the footsteps, and they're going to be running down the platform.
Yeah, transit, it could be a bit, though.
That's the thing. Yeah. Even with the repeaters sometimes, and this is an 80s or 90s transit, the radios may not always work.
No.
Depends on where you are.
Yeah. It did not always work, and they ain't running one car, so they're not going to get there. It's the precinct guys who are going to get there, whatever precinct's covering, but they're on a different frequencies. So by the time they hear it, they know the state. There were times that 10 minutes went by. And
that's an eternity.
And they'll come. They always come. NYPD is good about coming up. LAPD too, obviously. It's good about coming to backups. Mm-hmm. Except your house mice. They would never run out to go help a fellow cop.
But they'll listen to the radio, though. They'll have the radio.
Oh yeah, they know. You look at their Facebook and they have pictures of themselves and all these. They're in uniform all the time. They're holding a rifle, but they don't do the job.
Yeah, it's all for show.
Yeah.
It's all for show. A few people like that over the course of your career. Speaking generally, you run into some great people, like you said, then you run into some real slugs. That it's like, how did you get on the job? Besides the patrol encounters, one thing too, when you were sergeant in the 8-1, there was a sex trafficking ring that you were able to help bust up back in 2014 and got you a Sergeant of the Year award out of it. So tell us about that.
Oh, that's funny because I that was totally unexpected. I've had a couple of times where we've rescued kids that were being trafficked, or just girls who've been held, like simple domestics where, the guy's keeping her in the apartment. We've had to bust in and grab her. But this particular one, I didn't even think it was going to go anywhere. Actually, when they called to tell me they sent me a letter saying you won Sergeant of the Year. And I was a lieutenant at that point. So I just threw it in the garbage. I was like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. So I didn't think it was real. And then my buddy Terry, he had actually done a lot of the hands-on work. It started. I got the intelligence and with the victim, and him and the crime sergeant in the 7-3 did a lot of the hands-on work because I was an A1, and he had written it up, and so he called me and he's like, "Are you going to the reward thing?" I was like, "Dude, it's for like sergeants. I'm a lieutenant." What? And he's like, "But it was like a big thing. It was only 8 sergeants in the whole department who got it," and he's like, "No, it's from that thing." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then they called me and I said, yeah, I'll come. And it was actually a really nice thing. But that situation was I got intelligence. I think we arrested somebody, and we wound up talking to a girl who I think she had escaped from it, I believe. And that there was a house in the 7-3 where they're holding these girls and trafficking them. And I don't remember their ages. They were young though. So I was dealing with and arresting some other stuff, and it was 7-3. So my buddy Terry, who I worked with him in my first year in transit, great guy. He wound up going over there with the crime sergeant. They wound up having to and at first his patrol sergeant didn't want to do it, and I was like, no, it's 100%. It's just like when you have a domestic violence. You can't just, someone doesn't want to let you into the house. You're going into the house. It's the same thing. You have a credible report of sex trafficking here. It's not like you have we know that this girl was in there and she's telling us, yes, I was in there. There are girls in there right now and they're being trafficked. If they don't want to let you in, you have to go in. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. And you're going to go in however you got to go in. It's different if, let's say there's a wanted murder in the house, but he's by himself. You might, depending on what the laws are in your place, you might have to get a warrant, this and that. You might have to watch the house, get a warrant. But there's somebody, a possible victim of a crime, who could be being victimized as you speak. You just got to go in. So they went in and grabbed everybody, and it was a good grab. Saved a couple of girls from the trafficking. I've had a couple of those, where we've done that over the years. And sometimes it's more like just one girl you get her help, but sometimes it's been a couple of them. And it's, it's like one of those things where like, you're glad you did it, but it's like, you don't really want to be like, yeah, I did it. Cause it's like, you see,
it's a dark case.
Thing. Yeah.
It's a very dark case.
A lot of stuff you do it and you're like, yeah, I did a good job, but you don't even want to talk about it. You know what I mean? You don't even want to like tell anyone about it because you're like, yeah.
Yeah. And it's part of the ugliness that you see, as a police officer. Like I said, you see a lot of funny things. You see a lot of hilarious things. But if you're a first responder, kind of like I was talking about this morning with the previous show with Commissioner Tucker, EMS, fire, police, they all share this in common. You see some stuff you wish your eyes and brain could forget, but they never will. That's one of them. It had a good outcome, but it was devastating because you see the worst in human nature in a case like that. And it was the worst.
It's different when you get someone who's wanted for a crime. Let's say they're wanted for homicide. If they're wanted for like killing a kid or something, you're never going to feel good about it. But let's say they wanted for regular homicide. You don't know the victim. You don't know who it was. You just say, right. And you grab them.
Gangsters killing each other.
You get them on. No, it's still, listen, every life is important. Every life matters.
But the perception is different.
Yeah. But like if you just grab someone off, you recognize him off a wanted poster and he's for a homicide, it feels good. And you'd be like, yeah, I got the guy, feel good. I wasn't someone I didn't like to write. They used to like do write-ups, NYPD, a lot of people wrote. I never did those. Towards the end of my career, when my cops would put me in, I would sign it, but I didn't really like those too much. I always got satisfaction out of doing the job. Now, look, would I sometimes brag? Yeah, I just grabbed this guy. Yeah, I'd brag about, but I wouldn't like try to put it on paper. It wasn't, I was always like, people know what it like. I work hard at the job and I try to do the job, to 100%. And, at the end of the day, every lesson, you get someone who's killed on the street. Unfortunately, you're working, I worked in basically 95%, like the areas I worked in were 95, 100% Black and maybe some Hispanic, and maybe 10% Hispanic, whatever. You see a young Black guy killed in the street. And so unfortunately, this is what the media thinks. This is what, oh yeah, he's probably in the gang. Not a lot of times. No. Look, once someone starts cranking rounds in the street, those rounds are going to hit anyone. They're not good shots, these guys.
They're never going to hit the person they're after, too. They always hit the innocent bystander. Always. God forbid. God forbid if you're going to actually do that. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, but God forbid if you go down the wrong road, you actually hit the person you're trying to go after.
Right. Now, look, a lot of times they do hit the intended target. A lot of times the intended target's a bad dude, just like them. And sometimes they're not, or sometimes they're mistaken. Mm-hmm. They shoot the wrong person, or sometimes just an errant rounds. And so you never know. And it's like, I've had people who are shot, or even home invasion stuff where they got shot and killed and they weren't innocent, totally innocent person. But because he's a young Black man, it's just not a big news story. And it's one of the most tragic things. That's why. And as cops, look, the fact is that if I was going to say, I've been to a lot of shooting scenes in my career, right? I would say that, let's say 80% of the people were in the life pretty heavily. Maybe 85%, but 15% weren't, or 10%, whatever it is. Like, there's going to be a decent amount. Anyone who tells you everyone gets it, there's going to be a decent amount of people who are innocent in the wrong place in the wrong time, mistaken identity, or just shot, errant round, or, whatever, domestic, they're a witness to a crime, whatever it is, like, there's going to be that. And there's also going to be, guys who they were killed, shot once in the back of the head, execution style, and he's got, he just got out of prison and he's got a long, and that this was, planned and this and that, and to some degree he has some responsibility in it. But the fact is, he's still a human. If you start saying, well, this guy's a tragedy, this guy's not a tragedy, the problem is you got to treat everyone the same, as especially in this. You have to say, listen, there's a homicide and it's got to be solved. And look, it turns out the guy was the bad guy. Look, let's say someone's a child molester. I don't really think anyone really cares of the guys. You don't know though when you first get there. It doesn't really matter. And you gotta treat everything like this is the crime and this is what we gotta work with. And when you hear even people who are in the life, most people aren't child molesters. Even people in the life who did bad stuff. You got to watch what you say at a crime scene, because people's families are there. People's families come out. How the guy's brother comes out, the guy's mother comes out. You got to watch what you say about people.
Maybe somebody loved them.
Yeah, I've had people who I really didn't like and got killed, and I'm like, I knew that was going to happen sooner or later. You got to watch it. You got to watch it, because you don't know who's watching you, and most people have someone who cares about them, and you have to remember that. How would you feel if they, or if you're a relative and they were an innocent victim, and the cops are all thinking, oh, he's probably a gang member. We're run right away. We're running his history. Oh no, he's clean. Because we're just expecting that he's going to be. How would you feel if the cops are talking about this guy like he's a potential suspect, like he somehow brought it on him? That's not why cops run the guy. We run him so we can know maybe who shot him, who's having a beef with him. That's why we do it. But you got to keep that stuff kind of tight. You got to watch who's listening to you, You
can't get in trouble for thinking it. You can get in trouble for saying it,
And more so, you hurt people, and it's not right. And people are, you could love someone who's not a good person, and it still hurts them. You just have to kind of be a decent person,
It happens. Matt Alexander in the chat's asking if you know Captain Pete Casey or Officer Christina Tudor by chance.
No, it's such a big department. It's like you can name 10,000 cops. I might not know one of them.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I was going to say, because you spent, as far as the NYPD years were concerned, the first decade of your career between being a cop and then just being a boss were in Brooklyn, because you were in District 33 in Brooklyn, then you were in the 8-1. You make lieutenant in 2014. Yeah, just about 11 and a half years. And then you make lieutenant, you go out to Queens for the last 6 before you put in your papers. So just tell me about, again, even though, again, same job, a bit of a different role. Now you're a platoon commander on top of this. Just how long, because, much like firefighting in every borough is different, policing in every borough is different. There's Brooklyn-style policing, and there's Queens-style. How long did it take you to get used to Queens, if at all?
Not that long, because honestly, the 113 is probably the most violent precinct in Queens I get, but it's not as violent as Bedside, because 113 is a very big precinct, very spread out. The 8-1 was a very small precinct, and it was very condensed. So you might have the same amount of homicides roughly, but it's just, you can't compare, because you're talking about 1.5 miles versus like 20, however many miles the 113 was. It was a big place. So it's like, I would say you overall had less street robberies than in Brooklyn. You had fair amount of shooting. You had one of my years, we unfortunately led the NYPD in homicides, but that was like one of the lowest homicide years of all time. So it wasn't even that high of a number. I think we did a pretty good job. It was a very big precinct, very spread out. And so it's like it's same people, you know, like the 113 is basically it's an all black precinct. You have some Guyanese, and it's a little different in that, you know, in Bed-Stuy you had more projects. You had like 3 projects and a bunch of um really problem Section 8 buildings where there was a lot of problems, like a lot of shootings, a lot of around them. Whereas in the 113, you had one project, the Baisley projects, very busy project, the Baisley projects. But you know, you didn't have. So you had a couple of epicenters of your, you know, like where you have certain blocks, but there's like so many blocks where nothing happens ever. You know, it's like it's a middle. The 113 was what I try to tell people. Like, I heard someone call it a ghetto one time. I was like, yo, this is not the ghetto. This is a middle class. This is an upper middle class, lower middle class, and poor area. But I said, there's a lot of people who live in this area whose houses are more expensive than your parents' house. You think you're you think you're the Queen of Sheba over here. Listen, I mean, you know, like but it had it's just like anywhere else. You have 120,000 people in that precinct. You have a couple of thousand bad apples, and people from other places in Queens would come out there. And this is what I never dealt with in Brooklyn. Almost never dealt with Long Island perps in Brooklyn. Because it's further away, and not that far, really. But I never dealt with Long Island perps in Brooklyn, almost never. In South Jamaica, you would, you know, I wouldn't say every day, but you would deal with a lot of Long Island perps because people would come out here. I later found out I knew a guy who went to Nassau, and so I guess they would buy the drugs in the 113, but all the drug users, all the heroin users are out on Long Island. Most of them, there was heroin users in the city, but like, you know, I know this from going to Boston, you know, the heroin is a, you know, it's a white people's problem for the most part, you know, like black people use it, but it's a white people's. And so like, you know, you'd have a lot of perps who came into the 113 from Long Island, which I never had really dealt with that too much before. And occasionally I'd go out to Long Island for something, but yeah, so that was a difference. And you know, I mean, because the 113 was like where people did a lot of the crimes in Queens. Like it was like people came from other to do the crimes because it was, it's a big place. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of residences and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, like it was different. The crack was already, like when I first became a cop, crack was still a big thing. The crack epidemic kind of waned. You still got people with crack, but much less. When I first became a cop, every single person we stopped, every still street guy we stopped had a crack pipe on him and probably crack. It just lowered and weaned. And then, you know, you'd see heroin rising. For a while it was K2, synthetic marijuana, that I had a lot of that in Bed-Stuy and made people like they were on PCP almost.
Yeah, that was a problem citywide for a hot minute there.
Yeah, and the people acted like they were, and I had in the 113 too. Like people, it almost like it gives people that same intolerance, high tolerance to pain and craziness that PCP. And I dealt with some people on PCP when I was in South Central LA when I was a rookie. There was a PCP problem for a while there. And it's the same thing. They get that same 1,000-yard stare. They get really crazy. Not everybody, but some people, because they keep changing the ingredients to K2, and it would have different effects on different people. So you had that, and then you had the heroin started to get worse and worse every year. I never saw as much heroin as I saw even being a, you know, campus cop in Boston, because you know, it's like you know, like, but yeah, I mean, so. That was a big thing, like the difference, I would say. And I would say that the cops too, it's like I think cops should be representative more or less of the area they police. I mean, like in 8-1, it was always known as could be, obviously you had white cops, but you had a lot of black cops, you have a lot of Hispanic cops, a lot of people from the city, you know, lived in Brooklyn, you know, and I think if you're policing an all-black area, you should not have a majority white cops policing an all-black area. Just like I don't think there's any police department in the world that polices an all-white area and has all-black cops. I don't think that it's not the optics of it. It's just that if you're a person in the area, think about it. You want to see some people like
that look like you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm not talking about optics or just like it's just
No, just relatability.
Listen, and look, too many white people's no good, and too many black. You need a mix of people. You need
Right.
a mix of people.
Yeah,
And
healthy balance.
especially when I first came to 113, it was not like that because it's kind of a hook command. Even though it's busy for Queens, it's close to Long Island, so a lot of people would hook into that. And there's a lot of white guys from Long Island, and there was too many. When I first got to the 4 to 12 shift, when I first worked there was just too many white people on the shift. I got to tell you, there's no other way I can say it. There was just too many white people on the shift, and I had some problems that first year. I had some problems, and too many PBA guys. The PBA. Listen, this PBA. We need unions, but the PBA is not a friend to street cops or to good police officers. The PBA wants you to treat every cop the same, whether the worst cop, whether the racist bully who is terrible and lazy. They want you to treat that guy just as well as your best cop who treats everyone with respect and dignity and works very hard. All right. The PBA wants everyone to do like they do, no police work ever, and eat at fancy restaurants. So, you had guys who were very hooked into the PBA. It was one of the hardest years of my supervisory career when I first got there. I got rid of some people who were no good, sent them to other units they want to go to. I got some attitudes kind of adjusted. And it's not, listen, a white cop isn't better than a black cop. Black cop isn't better than a white cop. But you need some kind of you need a mix in there. You need different viewpoints. You need different. You just kind of need a little more of a mix. I just think and they just, it was a lot of just guys who were just saw this as oh my God, we're in the 113. Dude, I worked in worse areas than this. I'm sorry, bro. I've been working worse areas than this. It's not that it's not like you're saying. It's just not. And it's they had a little too much of an attitude in some ways, some of the guys, but it got better over the years. And by the time I left, I would say I worked the 4 to 12s for a couple years in the 113 for a year and a half. And then I worked a mid shift, and then I was on the day shift probably my last 4 years. And by the time I left, I would say my cops were, a lot of times your day shift cops aren't as good. The guys want to go home, but they were the best. There were some best ones. And a lot of good guys on the 4 to 12 and a lot of guys in the midnights. There's a lot of great guys there in the 113, but there were some problem shows, especially when I first got there. There was a lot of, it was you had to just kind of stand up and say, look, I'm not going to tolerate this,
right. And as a platoon commander, you had to kind of really set the tone for how it's going to go. I mean, it would have fell on anybody with a moral compass, but especially when you're the person that's in charge, technically speaking, all the more reason to step in and kind of say, okay, hey, this is how it's going to be. Whatever you thought before, no, we're going to pivot away from that, because that's the experience once again kicking in. Now, I got asked, I mean, of course, you were a cop at a university for a few years. I know you didn't like that too much. But that being said, I'm like, okay, 16 years in the PD side. You had 2 in Los Angeles. I don't know if you vested out in Los Angeles, took whatever.
No, I had 20 because I had 17
the military time.
Years and 2 months. No, I had 17 years and 2 months in the NYPD, and I had 2.5 years in LA. So it was about 20. And then, but I bought my military time back to retire from NYPD. I had to because my kids were living in Massachusetts, and I had to be out here for this. So I had to retire as soon as I could. I did about 20. I did 17 years and 2 months in NYPD, but my military time back. So I did an extra 2 months basically after I bought my military time back. But I would have stayed. I loved the job, but I had
seems like it.
Kids. Yeah, I loved the job. All my cops knew I didn't want to leave. I was working till my last day there.
And you were in a good spot too, because I know. Listen, family's family, but hearing you talk and hearing the passion, I'm like, I wonder what made him leave. Family, of course, makes total sense because you were. Yeah. That's probably the spot. I'd imagine circumstances being different than, of course, and again, it was nothing bad, but if the circumstances were any different, you'd probably still be in that spot, right?
I'd still be doing, yeah. So
I think that's probably where you would retire out of.
Yeah, I liked being I would still be doing it, and it was it sucked having to be, I became a police officer in university. I obviously knew more than everybody else. They've read a lot of police books and they've had a lot of training. They've told me they're
They know
domestic
the books,
violence
they don't know
certified,
the
but they don't
street.
know how to. They don't have any common sense. They're not like cowards, or they just have no common sense, and they make a lot of bad decisions.
Mhm.
And anytime I would say, no, we're not, we're doing it like this. Well, you're just a police officer, you know, and they didn't like like, I think they were a little threatened, whatever, but I don't like to get into that, but they weren't, a lot of them were not good people. And there were some really good people there that I liked, but a lot of them were not good people, and they couldn't be police officers in somewhere else. So they chose that for a career, or as guys who had worked and been retired like me, but they retired from like some of the richest areas in the country, and they never really learned the job. And so it was there were some really great guys there. Most of them left to go to Boston PD or other departments around there, you know, like there's some really good guys there, but overall it was not a good environment. The supervision was really bad, and they didn't know what they're doing. You know, like they weren't gonna. They were all worried about me. I think they thought they were gonna like promote me really quick, which they didn't, because I was doing more than everyone else. You know, I would look at the wanted posters, and I grab people who wanted for like serious stuff, and sometimes, you know, a lot of times Boston would take them, whatever. But they yeah, they just it wasn't a good experience. Like, unless I could be in charge of that, if I was like in charge of that department, I would do of a department like that, I would do it. But if I'm not in charge of it, if I have to be a cop, even a sergeant, I would not do it, because I have to be able to say, look, what you're saying is crazy, and we're not doing this. You know, like, and I would not have. I don't really regret it, because I learned a little bit about the Boston. You know, I've been to Boston court. I've booked some people in Boston. Been to the court. I've testified a couple of times in Boston, so I get to see how the Boston, courts are pretty similar. You know, like in Boston, how everywhere's different. So it's a good experience. I learned a little bit about criminal justice in Boston. It's definitely different. Policing is definitely different in Boston than it is in either LA or New York City.
That's for sure.
Quite different.
Another major city in its own right. Christian Williams is asking, obviously you were happy being a lieutenant, as you just mentioned, but was there a chance, if you didn't retire in 2020, that you would have eventually tried to take the captain's test, or was that not on your radar?
I don't think so. Maybe now, like, my body's breaking down, after all these years. I had a lot of injuries over these years. Like maybe I would have, but I would have, tried to stay in the precinct. But I think I probably would have stayed as lieutenant. Honestly, I liked it. Like, you do have a lot of authority as a lieutenant. I didn't like having to go. I had to go to platoon commanders meetings. I didn't like those, talk to the chiefs and stuff. But then you also had to go to the borough traffic stat, which sucked. But as a captain, you got to go to all the comm stat meetings. You got to go to the traffic stat meetings. You got to, and I had to go as a lieutenant, but you're the main guy for a lot of stuff. And then as an inspector, as the CO, there's a lot of stuff you got to do that I just wasn't my favorite. I had a cop who used to make fun of me, because he'd be like, Goldstein's always the first person at every homicide, but as soon as the chiefs start coming, the lieutenant always got to go somewhere else. But it's like, I think I always had that fear of, I don't know. I think it's because, look, I was never in a war or nothing like that, but I went to the Marine enlisted boot camp, and I went to the officer boot camp, right? Yeah. And then I went through the LAPD Academy and the NYPD Academy, and so I've been through so many of these things that I have a certain fear of authority that I just don't like hobnobbing with the chiefs. I'm not the guy who's gonna, like, some of them who knew me were like, oh, that's just Goldstein. They like, whatever. But I'm not the guy who's gonna be like, hey, chief, how's your, blah blah blah. Like, I just, it's not my. I just can't. Like, and I know some great street cops who went all the way up and are good with that, but I just, like, I think it's that whole boot camp, that whole, like, fear of that. I just don't like it that much. So I don't think I would have become a captain. I don't think so. I might have, but I don't know.
I don't blame you. Before we hit the rapid fire, of course, there is your book, Another Body in Brooklyn. What made you want to write it?
So I've written for a long time, actually. I also write science fiction. I had published a book of short cop fiction about 6-7 years ago. I took it offline because I'm redoing some of the stories. I'm just re-editing it. But the Another Body in Brooklyn, I wanted to write a book that it centers mostly on patrol. There's detective stuff in there and patrol, but that gives a realistic view of life in a busy police area, in a busy precinct. Now, I was just concerned with New York NYPD. I was just concerned with Brooklyn in it, but it's pretty, it's somewhat universal in a lot of ways. And I wanted to wear realistic, but also make it exciting and, kind of like a little funny. Sometimes you see the cop humor, you have to make humor and stuff, whatever. And also to kind of just give an idea of what cops are facing on a daily basis, because say, all right, a lot of books, there's a homicide, and so you have this gumshoe detective who's like, he's all about solving this, but you go to a homicide scene, right? You got a guy dead, and you stabilize the scene, and you're looking for witnesses, and they say, oh, there's a guy shot 3 blocks over. Someone's got to go to that too. You got to watch this scene, but then you got to go to that one too, and then you could be, even the detective's concerned. Okay, the way the NYPD works is like they rotate. So a detective will catch a homicide every, whatever. They rotate it, right? And then homicide helps them out. The homicide bureau helps them out. But and they're very good, very good. But the guy's got other cases. So, since this guy got murdered, it's like a month ago, he's got 3 robberies he's investigating. He's 2 shootings. The cops have been to 3 shootings since then. It's like a lot of stuff goes on in the city. And so it's like cops have to make a lot of decisions, and you don't always make the right one. And you try to usually make the right one. But some things will happen that you're like, how could that possibly happen? I'll tell you what happened. They didn't have enough people there. I would always tell people, you know what? We didn't get to your call for 3 hours. You had a traffic accident. I'm so sorry. But I was a lieutenant when I do this. I had to do all these investigations of the cops. And I tell them, you know what? Tell them, the NYPD, that there's 36,000 cops in this department and 18,000 of them work in administrative jobs. Everyone should be on the street or detectives. I say that's why, because sometimes you don't have enough people to hold the crime scene properly. Sometimes, so people are crowding in and you have to fight with people to keep the crime scene, sterile, so to speak. You have EMS going through, this. EMS, you're going through, they're kicking shell casings. It's going to happen. There's nothing you could do.
Right.
You got to save the body.
Patient care.
Yeah, you got to save the life first. But
Yeah.
once you want to get EMS in and out as quick as possible. And then, just keep it as, if you have the presence of mind to do it, take some pictures. If you get there before EMS, take some pictures, because, things are going to look a little different. There's going to be gloves on the ground now,
right.
EMS disposable gloves, there's going to, things are going to look a little different. Yeah. There's going to be bloody footprints, maybe, it's going to look a little different. So, but there's so much stuff going on in a big city that, you can't write I didn't want to write a story about a homicide where it's just that. I'm dealing with all the other things. And also it kind of gets in back to what I was talking to before, that, throughout the thing, and there's a lot of action, but realistic kind of stuff. And throughout the end, the main character, he's a good guy. He's always a good cop. He's a good hard worker, but he kind of realizes that, like I was saying before, every life matters. Like, regardless of how it was lived, that's not really your job as a cop to worry about how the guy lived his life when he's a homicide victim. Your job is to do your best you can for that person. And, everyone's got people who care about them. And he kind of realizes that if you start being like, well, I'm going to care about this victim, but I'm not going to care about that victim, it's like, sometimes you're going to be wrong and you should have cared about this victim. But it's easier to just be like, I'm just going to care about every situation, because this way I'm on the right side. And, I can understand what the family's going through and all that kind of stuff. Look, some families are assholes. Look, some family will come curse you out. They're generations of criminals. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about sometimes you have to have some empathy. No one wants to be told that they're a piece of garbage. I mean, you have to have some empathy for people. And, you might say, well, your son was running with gangs since he was 12 years old. What do you think's going to happen? He said, no one wants to hear that. They just lost somebody they loved. You have to be a little bit, compassionate with people. And you kind of just have to just be like, look, it is the job. The job is the job. There are times when someone will call us and they're not a good guy. I've arrested this guy before, but this time he's in the right, and I got to help him. It's nothing I can do. He doesn't have any warrants. He's in the right, and I got to help him. He's being illegally evicted. I got to help him because he's in the right. You know, I mean, you know, it is what it is. I mean, so, but I wanted to get that. I think I've had a lot of good reception about it. A lot of cops who I haven't talked to in a long time have called me like, yo, this is so good, which I really appreciate. I hope people buy the book. You're not going to read a more realistic police book, I don't think, than Another Body in Brooklyn. It's I do try to show the job, the warts and all. I love the job, but look, I had a lot of issues with the department, with any department. You know, I've talked about them on this show, but I love the job. I think it's one of the greatest jobs in the world, being a police officer in a busy place. And I really do think it's one of the greatest jobs in the world. But I did want to show like the positive and the negative, and also how you could kind of sometimes work around the negative, and sometimes you have to just go right through it and just see where everything falls, you know. And that's what I tried to do. But I you know, I don't know if you got a chance to read it yet, but yeah,
my EMS schedule has been so crazy.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I know. It's like crazy. But yeah, but yeah, like I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. So even people who have never been cops, like some older people have read it, really loved it. So yeah, I hope more people get it. And you know, like I have other stuff I'm coming down the pike, and yeah, but I mean, I definitely think that you'll definitely get a good idea of what it's like policing in an urban area when you read the book.
Well, listen, in between calls on the Boo Boo bus, you know, I'm going to start packing books in my lunchbox, so I'll be looking forward to reading
tough,
it.
Man. The EMS is a tough job, especially I'm sure you get a lot of overdoses and all that stuff, and it's just a lot. Yeah,
you know, and you get your frequent flyers too, just like you get in PD, you get them the same thing in FD and EMS. So, you know, listen, I'm paying my dues until I could hopefully get onto the fire department. So,
that's great. Yeah, that's a lot of guys do that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the police department too. It's a good stepping stone if you want to do either or. So, you know, definitely learning a lot. But I will be reading Another Body in Brooklyn, of which I've linked in the description of this episode for those of you that are interested in buying it. There's even a website too, and I also linked that in the description of this episode as well. We're going to get to the rapid fire, but first, a word from our friends. Once again, you heard them earlier today. You'll hear them again. Armor Tuff. Firehouse floors take a beating. Rigs rolling in, gear drop down, chemicals and spills every single day. That's why departments nationwide are choosing Armor Tuff. Armor Tuff epoxy floors are built for fire stations. Slip resistant, chemical resistant, easy to clean, and tough enough to handle anything the job throws at them. It's more than just a floor. It's a safer, sharper, and more professional foundation for your house. And here's the bonus. Armor Tuff is an authorized dealer for Groves. So if gear racks, PPE extractors, or dryers are what you're after, you'll find them here. Heavy discounts apply for Getting Salty listeners. So install an Armor Tuff floor and get Groves products at dealer cost. Armor Tuff, built for firefighters, built to last. Alrighty, that brings us into the rapid fire. 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. So I'll ask you too, because we didn't talk about your LAPD years too much tonight. The first question, rapid fire, in those 2 years, the most intense moment you had while serving as a police officer in Los Angeles?
In LA, I mean, there was, I mean, there was one time the kid had done a shooting and he started to turn towards me with the gun, and I was close to shooting him, and he dropped out at the last second. I mean, I got dragged by a car one time, stupidly. It was a friendly car. I got dragged by a car one time. I tore up my arms. I thought I was dead, and then I realized, oh, I'm okay. And then we kept chasing the guy. But I think so my first year over there, I was in South Central LA, and it was busy. I was trained by some of the best cops in the country, honestly. And I don't say that but I was fortunate that some of the guys I worked with were like guys who were like legends on that department. And, you know, LAPD, look, it's a little different. NYPD is more of a numbers, and it's more of a, you know, LAPD, you got guys who are like legendary cops who are like, you know, they're like, you know, and so I was fortunate that I got trained by some of those guys who were really good. I would say though, you know, your most harrowing things, things happen too quick. Someone starts fighting with you, you're chasing somebody. it's not, you don't have enough time to get that nervous usually. Even you hear a gunshot, you start running down the street. You don't really have time to get that. The scaredest I've been, honestly, is like, and this has happened at least a dozen times in my career, and probably more, when somebody's holding a baby or a very small child, and you're going to have to arrest them or take them in for a psych hold or something like that, and they're basically using the baby as a shield. And, you know, at that moment, you care a lot more about that baby than they do. Okay. And so, you know, you have to be really careful. There are times when you could just kind of grab the, you know, you kind of like feel it. You're like, okay, I got it. I get it. It's good. But there's times they're not going to let you. You can't. And then you have to talk to them. It's almost like a hostage situation, really, because, you know, it's their kid. Well, why is my kid? Yeah, but, you know, you're walking on you're walking on the side of the Van Wyck Expressway at 8 a.m. No wallet, no cell phone, just with the baby. People called on you. I know what you're going to do. I know you were going to jump in front of a car with the baby. We need to take you to the hospital, and we need to check on this baby. You know, it's like, you know, it's tense. You're more concerned. All they got to do is drop that baby. And they're not thinking right now, well, that's the problem they're going to have for the rest of their lives. All they're thinking is, I'm mad, and, you know, whatever. I had, you know, like, I remember one thing. I remember this because we just got in the cameras. I had the cameras in the last year and a half, the body cams. Like this guy, he beat his ex really badly. Beat her up. She comes in, she's all bruised. She's crying, took the baby. Now, he's never expressed any interest in this baby before. It's a common thing. You're not going to see him again. I'm going down to North Carolina with the baby. He's the baby's father. It's not kidnapping. However, you have to get that baby back immediately, because I've seen when it's gone wrong. When
doesn't turn out too well, yeah.
Right. But you can't put it on Amber Alert. He has custody just like she does. You're going to have a hard time. You're going to have to run through rings to get an Amber Alert, or to, like, this happened to me at least 15, 20 times in my career, like this exact situation. And I want to go get the baby now, because I'm not going to be the one. I've seen other cops screw that up, and they didn't act quick enough, and something bad happened to the baby. Most likely nothing's going to happen, but something sometimes does, and they kill, whatever. So I remember she's crying. I said, so I had been by the precinct, and she walked into the precinct. And so one of the community affairs, let me talk to you in private. I said, no. Ma'am, where is he now? And she's like, I'm just crying. I said, ma'am, stop crying. Where is he right now? Because a lot of times they know where he's going to go. I said, where is he right now? He's her ex, but she knows his game plan. Of course, this is his mother. Where is he right now? Well, he probably went to his mom's house, because he's never seen the baby, but she sometimes watches the baby. And he's probably his mom's. Let's go there right now. He's probably going to go there before he goes down south. Let's go there right now. So, crying. I said, stop. I need you to point him out when we see him. We get there. We get him just in time. He's walking to a car. He's holding the baby. We get there. The guy's bad dude, long criminal history. But young, relatively young. He's like, he's not giving the baby up. I'm like, sir, please, could you just give one of us the baby? He's like, no, have the you know, like, no, why am I going to be arrested? I said, listen, sir, we're not going to talk about that right now. I'm concerned about the baby. That's the most important thing. And, you know, it took me like 5 minutes to just like but eventually we were able to get the baby away. Then he fought us.
Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he?
The main thing is we got the baby away. I was in a bad position too. Once we got the baby, I was right in front of his face. But the important thing is, like, you know, you get the baby away. And I told the girl afterwards, I said, listen, I'll cry with you now. We'll have tea and biscuits now, but in that situation, like, a lot of times, like, especially when you have the woman-man situation, they know they know how he escapes from the domestic violence. They know where he's going to go. You got to get that immediately, as quick as you can, especially with the kid involved, because you got to get those kids back, you know?
Absolutely.
And yeah. And sometimes cops really, let's go take this to the detective squad, and they can say, no, you got to do it quick, you know? And that's a problem that a lot of people make.
Sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So, and that was one of those instances where you did. Some of these questions I don't even have to ask you in the rapid fire because you kind of answered them already. But one of the ones I did want to ask you is the second question, the rapid fire of what's going to be an abbreviated one, because you covered some of the questions earlier, is you were, in addition to being Sergeant of the Year, you were Cop of the Month 3 times. Sergeant of the Year, again, even though like you talked about earlier, was for a dark reason, it is nice to get an award like that because you did make a difference. Same thing with Cop of the Month. So what did those respective awards mean to you?
I got to say, if I could have done certain things in my career different, I would have. I was always like, I wrote a couple of things up at the beginning of my career and some really good grads things I did, and they gave me like the lowest level of. So after that, I never wrote anything up, and I never wanted any stuff. So I became Cop of the Month. I was kind of like, I never went to the things, and I actually made it 3 other times, but I didn't go to it, and I didn't. If I could do it over, I would have. I was the kind of person, I didn't like stuff like that. I just said, I do my job and blah, 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 blah. I said a couple of times, this only happened a couple of times, like people reached out to me to write stories about something that happened. And I didn't do it because I said, no, you know what? I thought I was above all that. Now, when you retire, then you realize, oh, shoot, I could have had all this stuff. I could have had all this documentation of this and that. Like, I know what I did. People I worked for know what I did. People I worked with know what I did. But it's like, I'm not saying I was the greatest, but I did a lot of good stuff, like a lot of us do. And then when you retire, you kind of realize, oh, shoot, but I mean, I can write my resume right, but I can't say this, that, and because I can't prove it. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, then you realize, oh, shoot, I should have been a lot more aggressive about myself in terms of like, I was always like, I would be like, yeah, I go grab that guy. You're an idiot. But like, I wasn't like big on, like that self getting better, like that whole Harvard mentality or whatever. If I could go back, I would have done that more because like, I'm at a time now, I went to Boston not knowing anyone and I had to do it for my kids. And, I got a job that was not good I was way overqualified for and wasn't good for me. And, so if I could, I think I would have done things a little, I would have like been to all those Cop of the Month ceremonies and I would have like, any time someone wanted to talk to me about something or write something about, I would have done it. Like if I had it to do over again.
I don't blame you for that. Definitely.
Yeah.
What's one case that stuck? Third question, rapid fire. A case that stuck with you long after it was over, for a good or a bad reason, either or.
A lot of the stuff that sticks with you is things you messed up or things that didn't go right. Because when things go right, it's just like, okay, it went right. It's all good. But when something doesn't go right,
True.
It's like you remember it like one thing that sticks in mind. This guy did a homicide and we knew he was going to come back to this location. So me and this the guy I was working with that was Sergeant Bedstein. We're like, yo, let's go over there. Let's see if he's over there. Let's go try and grab him. And this is a homicide. Like he was actively being looked at. Warrants is looking. We think he might go back to this location. So we didn't have anyone watching the back because I didn't have anyone else. So it was just me and him, right? We had someone watching back. So we knocked at his door. They let us in, and turns out we had a friend. He went out the back when we were talking to the people, but we didn't have anyone who could have watched the back, right? And so I got a citizen complaint about it because then they tried to say that they didn't tell me I could. Then the mother came down. You can't be in my house, but I was there legally. They let me in, but I got another citizen complaint on it. It wasn't substantiated, but it always let me. But because we'd have done that and we made such a big stink, they turned him in that night. To the midnight, because the midnight cop got the call. I don't care who gets the call, but
as long as the guy goes.
So all I got was negative stuff out of it because I got this, but we did help in getting, stuff like that. Or I've had guys walk right past me. It's like, I realized I'm looking at surveillance photo. Oh, the robbery suspect walked right past me. I didn't realize, that happens, and you feel like an idiot, there's, you don't remember all the times that I say, oh, there's you grab the guy. You remember the time you look like an idiot and didn't grab the guy, or you made so a lot of the stuff that sticks with you is that kind of stuff. But one thing that I think sticks with me is I remember as a lieutenant, I had to do a lot of investigations. Not only you're doing criminal, but you're doing cops would get complaints, right? They complain either they didn't do the job properly or this or that or that. Most of the time, they're not true, right? But you, or, and then, like, I remember, I was doing a lot of investigations, not only, you're doing criminal, but you're doing cops would get complaints, right? They complain either they didn't do the job properly or this or that or that. Most of the time, they're not true, right? But you, or, and then, like, I remember, I was doing a lot of investigations, not only, you're doing criminal, but you're doing it was an honest mistake. Like, I know the cops work for you because you're out. You should be out on the streets with them. You should see how they're doing the job. So it's just an honest mistake. But there was a couple of times that I got out of those. So what I would always do is, let's say someone says someone's hanging outside, or the cops should have taken a report on this, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that's kind of they should have. I go do it, and I had some very good arrests just by doing that, and like it wasn't anything wrong about what the cop did, but it was just like they made a mistake that I might have made, but rather than just saying your cop did something wrong, or like just saying, no, my cops are perfect, you're just an idiot. But why not just solve the person's problem?
Right.
That's the best way to go about it. And one time I got a homicide suspect. One time I got that I just happened to be there to arrest the lady, and I wound up. She had been renting the same apartment out to 10 different single mothers with children who were all already changed their bus routes. She was taking their first and security deposits, so like $5,000. These poor single women with kids, and she kept saying, putting it off. 10 different people. It wasn't even her house. She rented this one apartment to 10 different people. No one could ever move in. I wound up arresting her for writing a bad check, which is the first. I've arrested her for fraud, but I never arrested someone for writing a bad check before. That's not something we normally do. But I looked it up, and technically we could do that. Because I did that, we solved this thing that she had 10 different women. She was renting this. She would have kept doing it to all these different people that were never going to be able to move in there and really getting screwed over. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was an instance where, again, ahead of the game, good thinking, good understanding, was able to lead to a good outcome in that instance where, we can do that. Again, it's kind of a 1940 style enforcement, but it still exists. It's never been taken off the books. And the last question in rapid fire, because one of them, again, was I asked you this question earlier, which was a leadership lesson you took from the Marine Corps and law enforcement. You covered that well. So it's an abbreviated rapid fire where when you look back between the LAPD and the NYPD, and again, really, really good, a 20-year law enforcement career. Of course, you had the Marine Corps in there too. You survived a lot. You made it to the finish line. Not a lot of people do, like we've talked about on the show. A lot of guys and girls, it's a dangerous job. They get killed doing this job. So if you had to define these years between Los Angeles and New York City in a sentence, how would you define them?
Well, and I also had the 4 years as the campus cop too. So I mean, that's I did some stuff.
I know you didn't like it. That's why I didn't bring it up.
But there were some things that happened. But I would say that the mainly those 20 years. And mainly I would say that I learned. You always got to say to yourself, my heart was in the right. I cared. I wasn't thinking about myself or trying to be selfish. I was just trying to do the job that as best I could. And whether it was in my best interest or not, because I know the more stuff you do, the more complaints you're going to get. You're going to get complaints. You're going to get stings, especially when you go into someone's house and you say, listen, why is there no food in your refrigerator? You got 3 kids. You're wearing $200 sneakers, but there's no food in your refrigerator. And the kids, where they're sleeping, you have metal box springs on the floor. When you're doing stuff like that and you're saying, what is wrong with this? There's something going on. You're going to make some people who don't like you. Everyone likes the good guy. Nobody likes the hall monitor. But if your hall monitor is a little petty, that's not good. But if you're someone who's saying, listen, oh, well, the cops let me go these other 8 times. I drove drunk with my kids in the car. Well, guess what? I'm not the cool cop. I'm not letting you go. And so then people are like, oh, I don't like that guy. Well, the other cops let me go. So, so, I mean, you're not always, a lot of times you're going to be respected. You're not always going to be liked for doing the right thing. Same thing with cops. Mostly I tried to look out for my cops. If I knew they were good cops, I would look out for them 100%. People make mistakes. But if somebody was bad, they were a bully, they were nasty, you have to put your foot down, and it's a lot of people don't, because they want to be everyone's friend, or they say, I look out for my people no matter what. You look out for your people, you teach them to do things the right way, you won't have too many problems. But if you get someone who you let them do things the wrong way the whole time, you're going to have a lot of problems, and that person's not going to be good for the community.
No, not at all. This has been a great episode. Stick around. We're going to talk off the air. Before I say goodbye to the audience, though, Dave, if you have any shout outs to anybody that you want to give, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I never had the opportunity, I guess. So I'm probably done with law enforcement. Probably after I I left the campus a couple months ago. So I would say I want to thank the people who trained me originally in LA. I learned so much from those guys. Really great street cops, and I want to thank just all the people I worked with over the years. And I've made mistakes. Maybe sometimes I said something that wasn't nice, but my heart was in the right place. I always tried to look up for people, and I tried to do the right thing. And nobody's perfect, but I I just everyone calls me and says the job sucks now, this and that. But they were saying that 10 years ago. So it's like, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I first, they were saying the job sucked. So it's like you got to kind of put that in perspective a little bit, I think, and just kind of realize that you're lucky to have the job. It's a pretty good job.
It's a very good job. It's a very good job if you're able to get it and hold on to it, of course. Like I said, stick around. We'll talk off air. Thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight, not only for this show, but of course our show this morning with FDNY Commissioner Tucker. It's not often that we do double headers. I used to do them a lot, but I don't do them as much now. But circumstances changed, and of course I had to do them. So no show this Friday. I'm working on the ambulance, and your shifts are kind of all over the place when you work EMS. So I don't want to market the next shows just because I don't know when my next day off is going to be right now. Hopefully I'm off Monday, then we'll have a show Monday, and then we'll take a break for the rest of the week. But again, thank you very much for everybody who tuned in tonight. And again, earlier this morning, the outro song that you heard, or you're going to hear if you listen to this morning's episode, I didn't introduce it, was from their 1998 album, Dizzy Up the Girl, the Goo Goo Dolls with Slide. But for this episode, from their iconic 1994 album, Super Unknown, Soundgarden plays us out tonight with Fell on Black Days. In the meantime, on behalf of retired New York City Police Lieutenant and formerly, of course, Los Angeles Police Department officer and author on top of that, David Goldstein, I'm Mike Colón. We will see you next time. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your night, great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.